Hi, Samuel here. Starting to try my hand at recording some of these international championship games for now. Especially since there's the ever-present usual content creator is not in Grandmaster this season. So I was hoping that some of these videos could fill in that void. Um, what I have here is the first game of the first four-player game that was finished between Irene, Silent, myself, and Wawrzyniec. Um, I think I'll probably go with using the color or the leader from here on out, since I'm pretty unconfident with my pronunciation of that. Um, there were two three-player games that I already finished. I'm not really sure that I'm going to go back and analyze my three-player games as much, since I'm a lot less confident in my analysis with them. Um, so I'm just going to start by going through their turns. Irene takes pyramids. Especially with the setup, I think pyramids is a great wonder. It's probably, I think in general, pyramids is probably the best age A wonder in four-player games. I understand that a lot of people like Roman roads or library to occupy that spot, but I have a strong belief that civil actions are very important and generally benefit to about the equivalent of a third to half of a yellow card for the age, just because of that extra flexibility in civil actions. Um, and then Silent, he takes Stonehenge. Um, I think that this is also a pretty reasonable pickup. Just picking up a wonder, I think Stonehenge is quite good, even though you might be able to get Colosseum or Roman roads, which could possibly be better. I think it's pretty important to pick up a leader or a wonder in your starting picks, because you don't want to have to spend so many civil actions um, in your first couple of turns just trying to grab the stuff and not being able to like pop and build your mine and stuff as well. Especially with a four-step wonder like Stonehenge, you don't want to have to start it late, and it's like you just want to like do the things that are civil actions instead of picking up yellow cards, basically. So I want to come to the leaders and wonders now that the first ones are picked. Sun Tzu is on the row, and so is Caesar, and so is Boudica. Boudica is definitely a very difficult leader in this setup because there's so many leaders that already have strength bonuses. So it's hard to definitely don't really want to pick her, since she's only going to have the alternative effect as opposed to the choice one. I think Sun Tzu is actually quite strong here with pretty good synergies into a possible colonization strategy with Suez in the game, or just trying to pick up Sun Tzu into Columbus with a vast territory. But there's some pretty good colonizing leaders with Barbarossa and Isabella. Also, the obvious synergy with Shishka is apparent as well. And then just looking at the whole list in general, you have the Suez and International Red Cross kind of going together. You don't really have big science payoffs because there's no space flights. So there's no Pierre for like internet or anything, because that's usually the best leader for it. So in general, I'm looking at these wonders here. Besides possibly Red Cross, the rest of them aren't big point getters, like Hollywood or Spaceflight generally would be. So these are all about middling tier in terms of like how many raw points that they can generate. So there isn't really, you can kind of go into any strategy that you really want to, since there's nothing I feel like that super stands out at the end. Obviously, you have Manhattan to make science a little bit better, but it's still not going to be much more than like say 8 to 10 points most of the time. Sometimes you can get to 15 with 3 computers, but in general that's a little on the high side. So anyways, with that being said, in terms of the early leader stuff that I talked about, I actually go ahead and pick up Sun Tzu. I think that he's perfectly fine with the synergies listed, and I'll pick up these 2 yellows as well. His patriotism, kind of questioned picking it just because I wasn't sure if I wanted the hand space. I didn't want it to take hand space, but kind of went with it anyways. There's some reasons that you might want to take the patriotism because I might just not have the military actions to build up how I want to. And I kind of want to, be a little bit on the stronger side with Sun Tzu to begin with. Even though in third position it's not as strong of a thing to go for strength, still is nice to go for. And then red goes Caesar and engineering genius. I kind of looked at this and thought it was a little on the weird side, but it's probably fine. I was thinking that maybe Hammurabi might be the best pick in general, just because I don't really like Caesar too much. But then I guess Red would run the risk of Airren taking Caesar, and then with me and then being behind Caesar and Sun Tzu could be really tough to deal with. So maybe he just wants to play a little bit on the safe side here. Alright, so going to Airren's turn. Takes Boudica, which I'm pretty sure I don't agree with this based on what I said about, especially because there's two strength leaders here, so you know that you get the military resource trigger instead of the option one. I think Hammurabi or Alexander would probably be the better option. Also, just to note that both Colosseum and Roman roads fell, so we have me and Caesar have very good options to take in our coming turn. Sound like was Hammurabi. I'm actually also not sure about this one as well. I think Alex is a little bit better than Hammurabi, but that's just my opinion. I can understand that Hammurabi is much more useful with 4-step wonders. Just that I feel like you can definitely be pressured a little bit, even if you're before Sun Tzu and Caesar with Hammurabi. So not 100% sure how I feel about it. So I got Sun Tzu, Colosseum. Definitely the choice between Colosseum and Colossus here. I did say there was the aforementioned colonization strategy that was present, but I like Colosseum a lot more in general. I think it works better with Barbarossa. Just holding colonization cards is easier as well. And I just generally like Colosseum much more as a wonder than Colossus. And then I just do standard stuff after that. Select Caesar, increase pop, holds the mine, and then takes Colossus, which I was a little surprised about. I actually really thought that he was going to take Roman roads. But I guess he sees the same strategy that I do with the whole colonization and kind of wants to hedge on it. I just think that Roman roads is stronger anyways, though. So I kind of think that Colossus is just a really tough wonder to be good. And when it's good, it's amazing, but when it's bad, you can really tell that you want something more than just 3 strength for 6 resources. Or, sorry, 2 strength for 6 resources. So, Airren has to use bonus, from Boudica, just for a warrior, which I think is a little unfortunate. But then immediately switches to Nostradamus, basically saying, wow, that actually really did suck. Why did I pick Boudica to me? But Nostradamus is perfectly fine to pick up here. And then starts the pyramids. Silent goes for Code of Laws, which makes sense with Stonehenge, since it's going to be collecting science pretty quickly. And it takes cultural heritage, which I thought was kind of interesting since he already had a bunch of science coming from Stonehenge. The first seed that I do is Uncertain Borders. It's kind of speculative. I think there's a good chance I'm going to win it based on my turn, because I think I'm going to take the knights, and it's pretty easy to draw a tactic. So I figured I had a good chance of winning it, and at the very least I probably wouldn't be the weakest since I'm Sun Tzu and I basically should be able to get whatever tactics I want to. Still haven't drawn any yet, but I draw so much. That should be fine. So here I take the Knights and the Irrigation. I'm really looking at Barbarossa as a leader already with Irrigation pick. Especially with Colosseum and Barbarossa, I feel like that's just Colosseum, Barbarossa, Irrigation. That's really all you need coming out of age 1. Coming out of age 1. So I feel pretty great about this already. I do build the mines since I don't want to fall behind in production. And I don't feel too bad about risking the events because I'm going to get Happy Face from Colosseum. And very often I don't really mind missing the Temple event if I have Happy Face sources from anywhere else. If I miss the Warrior event, it's kind of unfortunate, but I wouldn't be able to increase population anyways, I believe. Oh no, I would actually. So if I miss the Warrior event, it's unfortunate, but it's not the worst. And then Temple event and the Warrior event come up, so I get pretty maximally punished for not increasing population, but it's not the worst. It's just a couple resources. So Caesar goes for a step from the Engineering Genius, picks up Printing Press and Airren. Airren definitely pretty good pickup. I was kind of thinking that he might go for Zizka, but this is fine. Yeah, I was thinking just like Airren and Zizka instead of building any steps. This does mean I think that Silent is going to get Zizka, just because he's already going to lag behind in strength, and it's going to want an easy way to catch up. So yeah, Printing Press because he hasn't built the lab yet. Aryan Development Planning, and the options are Science, Crafts, and Civil Life. Looks like he takes the Science, finishes Pyramids to immediately begin Silk Road. Patriotism, also extra good with Silk Road. Airren reveals the tactics, so at the worst case scenario, I do have the fighting band already. And I think he does reveal it because I did put in the uncertain borders, and there's a chance that I can flip while it's still while he can still be the strongest. So that does take Zizka, which again I think makes sense. Goes for the Code of Laws. Takes Alchemy, which means he's set up for quite a bit of science in this early game. Does build the Warrior. Wasn't really sure about that, to be honest. He did take the free Temple and then builds the Warrior. So I'm not really sure about building this Warrior since 100% sure what tactics you want to go for. But he did take Zizka, and it's just that if I go for medieval army, you don't really need the extra warrior. So not 100% sure I feel about taking it here, building here, because he's guaranteed to be the weakest anyways. At least on my turn. Oh, and then takes Theocracy. So here I ceded inhabited territory. Since I have this pact with Silent for the Naval Trade Agreement and the cartography here, I definitely full on switch to seeding colonies. Just give it a second. Sorry about that. So I use Civil Life to develop the irrigation, to save the science. I still have enough for cartography. Pop twice, get out of corruption, and play with fighting band. I have the fighting band anyways, might as well just use it to be a little bit stronger. Still draw a couple cards in their colony. Caesar's double seeds and hits a strength event that I did not put in. Most likely himself, and hits himself with a strength event. But now Caesar finishes Colossus, starts building up Airren, but he did skip a lab, so he's going to be tight on science for a little bit, and by going Airren instead of printing press this turn. I do feel like maybe printing press is probably better than Airren, just because you do want some science gain, and you're really going to want, military tech at some point. If you're spending 3 science to build printing presses initially, then it's really hard to get the next tech out. So Caesar's going to fall a little bit behind on science by going this route. Doesn't seed, takes the warfare, which I think is great with pyramids. And this part surprised me a bit, where he starts the Silk Road and then builds 2 more warriors. I figured that Airren would probably build the lab at this point, but he did see that I seeded uncertain borders, so he does really want it. And that's more of a commitment than I was expecting. Volts for Theocracy, switches to switches to Shishka. Has a targeted copy, and now now he's just enough to not be the weakest. Here I seeded Developed, and Airren wins Uncertain Borders. I'm glad that this came out because it means that I don't need to get stronger this turn. I'm not too worried about any of the other possible strength events. And then with this turn, Barbarossa is already here, so I feel like I have to take him. Upgrade the farm earlier, and take the Swordsman. I really like having both Swordsmen and Knights when I'm planning to only be on Bronze. I do think that being able to access Age 2 tactics with units that only cost 3 resources is really, really good. I'm actually not a fan of using, if my endgame is consisting of Age 2 tactics and I somehow have to use riflemen and cannons, building a lot of those units are really expensive, and it only really works out well if you're able to start off on Airren. And since I'm going irrigation first, I much prefer having the cheaper Swordsmen and Knights. Throw away the Pollander, because I plan on colonizing instead of being strong. And then Caesar takes Machu Picchu and irrigation, and then finally builds that lab. So these speculative printing presses never really came to fruition because he realizes how much science he really needs. So while this position can be good, I think that this position can also be a trap. Even though you picked up Airren and irrigation already, it takes so many resources and time and civil actions in order to actually get Machu Picchu going that I'm not sure that the payoff is worth it all the time. We go down, we're still only at 3 science, so it's still going to be a while before you can really get any stronger than what he has right now. And you want to develop irrigation relatively soon anyways, when people are pushing for strength. So it's I do think that Machu Picchu in general just kind of eats up on the things that you want to develop, and eats up so many actions when you don't need so much resource production on 4CA. Maybe it would be different if this Colossus were a library or a Roman roads for at least some science production at some point, or even a Stonehenge. But I do think that going from a non-science producing wonder to Machu Picchu can lead to be kind of a trap situation, and you have to navigate it really well because you really are going to need more civil actions to take advantage of the resource production and being able to actually upgrade all your stuff to make it worth it. So I am the weakest here after this turn, but I'm still not too worried about strength events too much. Strategic territory, I send 1 unit and a card. Airren wins it for 5. Strategic is fine to lose. It's not the most important one, so perfectly fine with this. And he actually has to send 2 units in order to actually win it. So that seems great to me. 2 units and 2 cards. And then he takes a little bit of corruption here because he's not able to use the last of his resources. Takes Richland Alchemy. Definitely think Alchemy is a little bit on the weird side since he doesn't even just have his second lab yet. So it's possible that like Richland could be better. Just more rich lands because you have the Silk Road anyways, you want more yellow cards. Or even possibly instead of the rich land, just take Breakthrough Cultural Heritage since you know you're going to want a little bit more science. So that goes for Cultural Heritage. Goes for Swordsman because he wants to be a little bit stronger than me and Caesar. Takes rich land and builds a farm because it's Shishka. And I believe he built another step of Stonehenge. Yeah. So I cede historic territory here. New deposits comes out, and everybody gets about the same amount, which I think is great here, because this allows me to finish Colosseum. I can also take Taj Mahal after switching into Barbarossa. Not necessarily sure if this is correct, since it takes a lot of resources, and I'm going to be on bronze, but it's going to take no civil actions. Takes no civil actions now. At 4 civil actions, I'm not really going to be able to take wonders very easily. So I kind of just go with it. And then I take Breakthrough, and then I build 2 more warriors with Barbarossa. One of the big reasons that I want to switch out Sun Tzu this turn, even though I didn't need to build 2 warriors necessarily, but one of the advantages is that I have a turn in which my tactic is stronger than everybody else's, since everybody else is on the initial fighting band, and I want an upgraded version. I know that Inhabited Territory is in here, since I seeded it, and I really want to win it. So if I send 2, I just have much more colonization power than they can force, basically. And then, because Caesar's the weakest, I guess he doesn't want to seed. Finishes Machu Picchu, goes for Bread and Circus. And then this is going to be the kind of situation that feels super awkward for Red for a long time, just because he has so many techs right now in his hand, only 4 civil actions. He's going to have a lot of resource production coming in with very little science. So it's going to be hard to spend resources and going to be hard to spend cards out of his hand. And I think we'll start to see that really, really hurt soon enough. So Airren does seed and does flip Inhabited. I only have the 1 colonization card, so it does mean that I need to send an army. This is 7 strength total, but I still think this is totally worth it, since the units are cheaper coming from Barbarossa. Takes reserves, takes frugality, just takes some yellow cards, upgrades the lab, and finishes Silk Road. So Airren's science production is definitely coming up. Though I'm still a little bit unsure about the alchemy in general. Airren seeds and flips fast, which I also bid 2 units again for. I bid up to 8 because I had the card and the 2 units. I was really happy to see Vast because I definitely didn't seed it. And this is even better for my yellow bank already, since now I have so many extra yellow tokens. 5 extra yellows already. Silent finishes Stonehenge, otherwise wouldn't be able to. Takes Engineering Genius, increases Pop, and just builds a Swordsman here. Oh, and develops Alchemy as well. Surprising that he didn't take reserves, but also not too surprising at the same time, since Silent is going to be on 5 civil actions and already has a bunch of yellow cards. Cultural Heritage is like a slow one anyways as well. So I definitely see why you'd want to just do the actions that matter here. And I think I probably would have done the same in his position. So now I'm on 1 strength, and I have Barbarossa and only 4 resources available for the most part. So I had a bunch of considerations, which were well, just a couple considerations, mostly based on the varying amounts of units I wanted to build. I start by developing Swordsman because I had 4 cards in hand before using Swordsman and Breakthrough, and I was definitely considering taking the other Breakthrough or the reserves here instead. But basically, I could take Breakthrough, play Patriotism, and then build a bunch of units, or I can take these reserves, which I also think are really important since I need more resources in general. And in the end, I take the printing press. I did talk about some of the leaders earlier, but printing press has value with Darwin, it has Shakespeare. I already have 5 extra yellow tokens, so I could support it. So I kind of speculate on this printing press. Red loses Caesar, which is unfortunately timed. I only just barely ended the age. Goes for irrigation, so more science, more civil actions not invested. Or so many civil actions invested, basically. Has 2 science, 4 civil actions. I do think it gets tough in this position. Historic, I did see this. There's still a Suez in the game, so I figure I might as well try to go for it. And I didn't think anybody was going to bid for it anyways, but these units are still cheap for me. Iron takes Breakthrough, reserves for the extra bonus, and then builds an alchemy straight up. Adopts the better tactic. Airren is not one of the 2 weakest because he's Nostradamus, and wouldn't have been anyways. Goes for Airren, and then just starts building up both of them at the same time. And then also copies the better tactic. I feel really fortunate that a Republic is around here already. I have a decent amount of science. I could go for Republic in 2 turns. So I'm definitely going to just take it. Even if I don't go for the science, I can also just revolt and use Barbarossa to get myself out of corruption. So a lot of good reasons to go for Republic on this turn cycle. Scientific Breakthrough, so I can even do it 1 turn sooner if I wanted to just go for it normally. Play the reserves to make hand space, and then use Barb to get out of corruption and be one of the strongest, of course. I did see that foray, so I definitely do want to be strong. And I have this Plunder, which could look good against red. So red goes for Eleanor. I am honestly a little shocked by this, but he does provide extra civil actions to get back, so it does make sense in a transitional sense. I was just kind of expecting to be Napoleon directly, but Eleanor she does make some sense. One important thing to note is that red only has 3 cards. 4, it's not very strong, and both me and Silent, he needs an H2 defense card, and he only had the opportunity to draw the ones from Colossus and 1 here, so that's 3 total. Sorry, 4 total. It's pretty hard to hit a defense card off of only 4 draws. Cultural Influence, really good for Silence, not so good for me, but that's fine. Airren also has a bunch of science from that Scientific Breakthrough, goes to Republic right away. So he will just end up taking a bunch of cards. And definitely some good ones to take there. Sonic goes for the aggression, but red did have the defense card. But that does open up for the idea that maybe I can go for the aggression. Silent just takes selective breeding, couple yellows, and upgrades to production, which she definitely wants to spend time doing. And yeah, I mean, Silent's economy is actually looking pretty good already. He's going to have +4 science production, +6 rock production soon, and has the selective breeding. So he's essentially set in terms of like economic things that he needs to build. And he already has a government, so he's not really pressured to look for another one. So I think Silent's looking pretty solid at this point, and the extra strength and culture production from Jiska must be really nice for him as well. Since I have 11 science, first I plunder red because he only has the one H2 defense card now, so it'd have to be really lucky to have drawn 2. Just take the resources because it's what I need the most. And then Airren and I are going to start to play about the same kind of game, which is take a bunch of yellow cards and we'll see what happens. I build a warrior to be one of the strongest again. I do still know that the foray is coming up in this deck, and I believe I also have a developed territory left that I haven't colonized that I know is in the deck. So I know I want to try and send, again, at least probably another army for it, since another warrior army for it, and be able to defend against Silent. And then I just start by building I build another farm because I'm spending population. I'm building population so fast that I do think I want the extra food. Also gets me out of corruption, and I do spend the extra action building Taj Mahal stuff. So red finally gets in a defensible range against Silent, but is not defensible against me, except that these except that the developed is revealed, like I said, and I will go for it because it's definitely better to try to go for the developed than to go for this infiltrate that will only hit this one H1 leader here when it's already H2. So that goes for cannons and cavalry. Developed cavalry, gets selective breeding, organized religion, mission upgrade. Silent has the Silk Road and a lot of cards, or a lot of actions, so it's definitely using his civil actions as his economy, even though he has no production really. So, like I said, he's going to be very similar to the type of game that I'm playing, I think. This does hurt since I just upgraded food production, but it's fine. I mean, I still have good food production, so I'll be able to get that population back. It goes for railroad, which does surprise me a little bit. I would think that maybe going for Harvard is probably the better wonder for him. That way, coming into H3, he'll have 7 science production. Whereas I think that 7 science production is probably better than 8 rock production for him. But, you know, railroad does come with the strength, so maybe Silent does find that relevant. But yeah, also, you know, Harvard is cheaper, but I do think that you want to spend. I do think that Harvard's a little better here for him because, you know, he only has theocracy. He wants more science to be able to like go for an H3 government, or maybe even just like civil service to get up to 6 civil actions or something in that vein. Uses engineering genius, takes organized religion, and builds a step. So he's going to be able to finish railroad next turn. This signals to me that he kind of has like a war idea going here, and their strategy on the row. But because I have this printing press, because Shakespeare's on the row, I don't necessarily feel like I have the time to take strategy for 3 here. I really want to get my science production up because I want to be able to build. I want to be able to have the option to go for knights and cannons, basically, Maybe not immediately, but I definitely want to be able to threaten some semblance of strength gain, even though I don't take the strategy. I personally don't have the science for it anyways, so it's just like a really expensive pick for me to not be able to use. Um, I'd much rather build up my science a little bit, finish my Taj Mahal, and then with the rest of my civil actions, kind of take the cards that set me up for Shakespeare. Like I said, I do have a lot of extra yellow tokens, 6 extra, and I even have an extra blue token from Taj Mahal now. So while my resource production isn't good, I'm hoping that Shakespeare will make my buildings cheap enough that I can just spend a bunch on. I can just hopefully just build up my army with only Barbarossa, and then the urban buildings will be really cheap with Shakespeare, so I don't really need that much resource production. At least that's the hope. Red goes for international trade agreement with me, and I will gladly take the extra food, even though my food production is already really good. I actually think that food in general is probably the more valuable on this side. Having an extra population or two, it really helps out a lot for the long term. And I do want to be able to access as much of my yellow bank as possible. So even though I have only 3 resource reduction, I still think I'm happier with the extra food. Goes for method and double upgrades, and then takes the rifleman. Because it's the only reasonable path to get stronger. I can see the reasoning to take Conwan, but Rifleman's on 1, second Conwan's here. All the rest of us have governments, so he can probably wait to get the Conwan next turn. Airren offers scientific cooperation, which is a super unbalanced pact on a +3 versus +5. Plus, Airren has more civil actions, which makes scientific cooperation even better. Especially when he has 8 civil actions and Silent only has 5. So you just have more opportunities to actually spend the science. So basically, Airren finally builds up a lot of his production. He uses a lot of yellow cards this turn, which I was a little surprised about. Since he used 3 different ones, he only got the extra bonus from Silk Road once. I was thinking that maybe he would space it out a little bit, but then he also just ends up taking 2 more yellow cards, so it makes a lot of sense why you just keep going that way. I was really hoping that one of these 2 would deny the strategy, but now Silent gets it, and he does have the science for it. Thankfully, he goes for War of Technology against Red. I was really afraid that he would choose to go for me when I saw the strategy going. A War over Tech, while not super devastating, it is kind of a little bit on the annoying side. And then I saw one of the reasons that he did go for Red is because there's actually not that many cards available left on my turn. Or cards left in Age 2 on my turn. And I think that Silent was a little bit scared that the age could end. I think if I could do some way of really forcing it along. Since I could probably take like 3 or 4 of these cards, move the row down a bunch, and then Silent would probably do the same since he has a bunch of civil actions left as well. And I think there would be a pretty good chance that we could kind of force the age to end, and then Silent would lose 4 strength from Zhishka, basically. So I'm really thankful that he didn't go for me, and then Eleanor only has really only one option to get stronger, and it's not even by much. So, oh sorry, it's my turn still. So I take more yellows basically. Keep in mind I have a maxed hand right now, so every card that I need to spend, every card I want to draw, I have to spend at least 1 as well. Play the Rough Idea, take the reserves, go for Shakespeare right now because I only have enough hand space, and then I take the Urban Growth. This is probably like the second time already that red has come into a position where just no yellow cards are available for him. Mostly because Silent and Iron just taking them all. Sees Crusades, so loses 4 culture. I mean, at this point, culture is a very big difference between these two. And I think that it's very possible that red is only going to have one real path to victory, which is war-based. And I think Maria is going to help that a lot, since she'll give 3 extra resources quite often. So she goes for Maria. Upgrades as much as he can. Maximum strength is pretty low, so even if Silent were to lose Jiska, losing 4 strength, he'd still win by 2. And with the extra actions, takes Conmon and increases pop with Justice System. Arguable if Justice System is correct at all to pick up. Again, it could just be hand space things, but I don't think that. I think that red has so many things that he wants to spend on science for, first being Conmon, that I don't think this is ever going to get developed. Like, there's a chance that Irene would want to go for Justice System, or I would, but I just feel like you could probably just leave this on the row, to be honest, because I don't know if you're ever going to be able to afford going for it, but who knows. Yeah, I just think that at this point, you need to spend science on Conmon, at least 1 or 2 more military techs, probably warfare tech, has to be military theory for the most part, and you're going to want Air Force too, because we're looking into this position to the game where production is actually not even that good. Eaten some events early on, didn't have a lot of civil actions. It doesn't really feel like where you want to be, because you are still going to be the weakest for a while, even with Maria's bonus. Not actually producing much culture. Science is fine, but it's not like amazing. Resources are fine, but they're not amazing. Yeah, so production is above average for the rest of us, but also really suffering in the sense that doesn't really have a lot of infrastructure to go with, especially because he's so deep in his yellow bank already, and this next turn is going to lose 2 more, so this population is forced to go into the arena. I don't usually try to say that this game is over by any means, but I just think that red has a very uphill battle to play, being much lower in culture than the 2 leaders, and not really a way to catch up that easily, and not really a way to pressure people militarily for a while at least. Irene offers scientific cooperation to me. Of course, I'm going to reject it. Basically the same basis why I thought Silent should reject it. His production is much better than ours, and just don't think it's necessary. So we essentially on yellow card hunts. Finishes upgrading food. Upgrades the religion to get out of happiness problems maybe next turn, and then just build cavalry, or increase population and build cavalry to be one of the 2 strongest. I believe one of these 2 events, or one of these 3 events, is Foray, and then one of these events was seeded by Silent, and the last one was seeded by Irene. So definitely could be something strength based coming up in this deck. Well, I mean, we know that Foray is in here, and we know that he saw it from my Nostradamus as well. So he does want to be one of the 2 strongest, and wins by 6. Wins by 6 and just steals 6 giants straight up. So again, that was a big reason why I said that it's going to be tough to go for this justice system to lose that much science. And Silent goes for Newton, which makes sense over Darren because of the temples and the lack of civil actions. So I really like the Newton pick here, because being on such low civil actions, but being on high science, it's definitely it feels much better. It definitely feels much better to be Newton in this kind of situation when you have low civil actions. It makes it feel like you have so much more. And the age does end when it comes to my turn, just barely. It was pretty close with Silent, but he didn't quite lose enough. Didn't quite take enough cards because Airren and I just spent more turns kind of focusing on infrastructure instead of taking cards that turn. Alright, so because I'm Shakespeare, go for urban growth, take some yellow cards. I do speculate on the architecture, and I play the reserves. I actually think that these last two moves were a mistake. Instead of taking the architecture, I'm thinking that I want to make these operas even cheaper because I want to build 2 more and try and save 2 resources. Hopefully make these printing presses free as well. But I really think that in this turn that I probably should have increased food production. Although I can still increase 1 food every turn, or 1 population every turn, I think that there's going to be some ramping in military pressure, especially because Airren is Napoleon. And then Maria Theresa really needs to actually put on military pressure in order to have a game going. So I think that just any little extra food trickling could be better here. I could also potentially take this efficient upgrade instead to upgrade the food next turn. I didn't take this option because it'd only be 2 resources. And then I also don't even look at the coal option at all because I think that I'm going to have very limited amount of science. I want at least cannons and I want at least Air Force. And I know that I don't have enough science to go for both of them unless I get at least 1 revolutionary idea. So this architecture already feels like it's too much of a luxury to try and speculate on. Because I want 18 science in order to be able to do cannons and Air Force. There was also the thought that I could play the architecture this turn and then build the theater, because I built the theater this turn with the urban growth to make it only cost 1. But I really wanted to be able to go for cannons next turn in case people started getting stronger. I wanted to be able to follow suit. I don't have any defense cards at the moment. I do have a really great tactic though, actually, that I just drew last turn. This is a defensive army. It really did save my butt a lot in this game to be able to draw that. So yeah, alternatively, instead of playing those reserves, I could also just bite the bullet and play the patriotism here. I initially kept these patriotisms for a long time because I wanted the offensive potential. But I think I just think using patriotism here instead of reserves makes a little bit more sense. Because what I end up doing is that I end up trying to upgrade stronger than Airren anyways, and still only drawing 1 card. So I might as well just use the patriotism and upgrade 3 times instead, and still just draw the 1 card. But I kind of figure that I can use patriotism plus wave, build my next 2 cannons anyways. And I don't want to commit this population that I have anywhere right now. Because I'm pretty sure that I'm going to build 2 cannons next turn based on what I perceive my opponents to do soon. So Theresa offers me military alliance. I do accept it, which is a questionable decision. I definitely preferred the plus food income more, but at the same time, I just felt like if I didn't accept it, then this plus 3 strength would go somewhere else, and I didn't want to feel pressured more than I already could be as Shakespeare. Yeah, it's tough because I really do have a lot of. It's tough because I really do have a lot of extra yellow tokens. So it feels like this kind of food production should be enough, but it's going to take a lot. I have so many in swordsman right now, and I know that I want to spend at least 2 or 3 more into cannons before I can really start going with operas and printing presses. So I obviously would want more food, but then I just felt like he would offer it next turn, and I just didn't want to be on the receiving end of possible wars from Airren and Silent as much. Anyways, Red's in a tough position, has to destroy a temple in order to build the arena. Does upgrade here. Takes the cavalryman. Really unfortunate that doesn't really have a lot of options to. He doesn't really have a lot of options in order to. Doesn't have a lot of cheap options. What I'm trying to say, sorry, because he still only has 4 civil actions. Yeah, it's just been really unfortunate how this game has turned out because we didn't lose that war over culture, or sorry, that war over technology. Things could have been a little bit better, but yeah, it's kind of what happens sometimes when you don't build enough science early, invest it into your production buildings, and they just have despotism, and it's just a really it just feels so terrible. But now he's one of the 2 strongest, so if Airren and Silent Seed, there's a chance that Red can win win the foray, so maybe that will help a little bit. But Airren was Nostradamus, so wouldn't really expect it, to be honest. And Airren goes for more yellows, takes Rifleman, so now he has all these great techs. And plays Classic Army. So Airren is definitely going to be one of the strongest in the next coming cycle. Silent goes for cannons. And communism. And uses organized religion. Builds up. Builds a cannon. So both players got stronger without ceding anything. I know that one of these is mine. I forget which the other one was. I think the other one at this point is Silence. So we do know that they really don't want to cede while they're the weakest. So at this point, like I said, I really wanted the opportunity to be able to go for cannons because I wanted to be one of the 2 strongest at least, and because I have the option of going for more theaters here, or just more pairs in general. But at the same time, I really do want to win these events, or I don't want to maybe lose one of these events either. Like I think Border Conflict could possibly end, and I think that Reign of Terror could possibly end. And Call to Arms wouldn't be too bad, but it does seem like it's a strength-based thing. So I do go for the Defensive Army, get the full use of the wave, but I can't use the Patriotism this turn because I use the rest of my actions taking military buildup, which I think is, while I'm the strongest right now, I think it's very easy for me to become the weakest very soon. And this is great to have, essentially enough resources to build 2 air forces. And I'm really hoping for it. It was really tough to pass up on this revolutionary idea, but I think the resources are so important when I only have this much. When I only have this much resource. When I only have this much, resource production. And this is where it kind of comes. This is kind of where it comes down to, like, I probably should have used that patriotism earlier to upgrade my swordsman. I probably should have spent a turn upgrading my farm as well instead of taking this architecture, because then I would have enough population for then I would have enough population for next turn as well. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get any pop out this coming turn, and it feels like that I might be forced to, if I want to try and upgrade my culture, it's hard to know where my population should come from if I'm going to start disbanding, which I really don't like doing. But I don't get my requisite +4 food this turn, and it did kind of was those small decisions that made it so that I couldn't do this. All right. So we'll move on. So definitely just, I think he just has to revolt right here. But luckily he can still get a little bit stronger. Basically he can defend very easily, you know, against the others. And I could go for an aggression, but at the same time I want to draw cards, and I actually looked this up. After drawing 5 H3 cards, and he only need, and I know pretty much for a fact that this is a defense card, just because it's been held for so long. I really feel like that this H2 card is a defense card. I don't remember if it was from bidding earlier, but I just had a very strong feeling that it was. And if you draw 5 cards, the chances of getting an H3 defense card is about 55% or so. So if I go for an aggression, it will work about 4 out of 10 times. But at the same time, I also want to draw cards, so going for an aggression does feel a little bit on the risky side for me as well. And basically, I come to a decision that I know that like 4A is in the deck, and when I saw this happen, I was like, okay, I think I'll try the aggression if 4A is already revealed, but I really want 4A out so I can be increased pop, and I'll play the event if 4A is not. So on this turn, Airren plays event, and Reign of Terror hits. So we saw, I think this was played by Silent, and I think he knew that this was here and didn't want to see it when it was weakest. So that does kind of suck since he doesn't have a free population. Airren goes for computers from 3 civil actions. Maybe eyeing Steve Jobs here. It's possible that he wanted to go. It's possible that Churchill would have been fine here, but he's definitely eyeing Steve Jobs. And I think that's fine since nobody else is really set up for him. Red could do it with just the scientific methods. But Steve Jobs is not really a military leader since he takes away resources, and can be done when you're a little bit more defensive. Like Airren can be defensive since he has so many civil actions to get so many resources if he wants to. And then he starts going for computers as well. So really getting that production up. Getting that science production up. So that goes for communism. Since he's since he's Newton, gets extra action. Goes for fortifications. And I think that this is great since there were so many yellow cards that I wanted to take last turn, and all of them are still here. Something that I should be concerned about is that my leaders are probably both on the row right now. Churchill and Chaplin. The only other one that I could feasibly take is Mandela, but I know that I would have to take him for a lot of civil actions since I can't really get into unrest. And like I said earlier, for this turn I do see the prosperity because I really want the 4A out now. I take 2 food, so I don't have to upgrade food production. I'm kind of thinking at this point it's too late, and if I want another population, I'm just going to disband this farm here. Because the revolutionary idea is still here, I go for the super greedy architecture, knowing that Airren's military potential is very low. Doesn't have enough science to go for Air Force right now. Can't even build it, even if he had can't even build it because it doesn't have the resources. Silent could potentially go for 2 more cannons, but needs more happy faces for it. Plus, his top end strength is only it's only plus 11 more about, and I can still just build 1 cannon for getting strength up to, well, I can go plus 1 cannon plus upgrades, so that's plus 4 plus 6, so I can go up to 43 relatively easily. And I think it's hard. I think I can be very safe from 43 for a while, basically. So I do go for this very greedy architecture, I think. Because I know that I will have enough turns in order to build up the science from my natural production plus this revolutionary idea. And then I just take the other yellows. But because I said that both of my leaders are on the row, I do risk them being taken or falling off. And it's perhaps possible that I should have taken an extra resource and taken this action to just upgrade my food production. I did seed prosperity, so I know that I can get 5 extra food, possibly this next coming turn as well. So I even have the possibility of increasing population twice. Yeah, because I only really need the 1 pop for the 1 cannon next turn. And I would love it if I could pop twice and then build a printing press along with it. Yeah, but the endowment there, it is worth 4 points. It's just really tough to say. Another reason that I would definitely want to increase food production is because I know that Red Cross is in the game, and quite frankly, this is the only wonder that I could possibly think about building. It's actually worth quite a bit too, since there are 5 colonies out, so it could definitely be a priority for me. So now Teresa seeds and Iconoclasm hits. I didn't actually think about this one too much, the possibility of this one too much. I thought everybody was getting a really good benefit from their leaders. Honestly, Shakespeare was only providing 2 culture for me, but he was providing discounts, so I do feel like it hurts me the most, but I think it hurts a lot of people quite a bit. Like having 3 extra resources to build a unit might have also been good here, but since he doesn't have the extra, red goes for Churchill, which makes sense militaristically wise. Pro sports, which also makes sense militaristically wise. I just think that, maybe you don't necessarily need Churchill if you still have Maria going, but basically has to upgrade. There's no real other way to spend resources. You could just upgrade here as well, but there's a lot of things that red needs to do. Because in order to use his actual next population, you need to increase it as well. But yeah, arguable if you should actually go for pro sports there, if you just upgrade twice, since the extra production would be nice. But maybe he looks at this and sees that he doesn't really need these bronze mines as much and can just get production can use these as population and just get production from 1 Airren or something and Churchill. Alright, so now it's Airren's turn. And he set up for Steve Jobs. Seeds economic progress, which would have been another reason to go for the upgraded food production if I had the extra food. I guess it wouldn't matter too much, but it just would have been nice. Also has the 4A bonus right now. So here on Airren's turn, I was kind of expecting to go for Jobs, Civil Service, and then maybe take the Red Cross this turn, since he has a bunch of food. And that is the turn that I would also like a lot. Spends 4 civil actions to get out civil service, but gains 2. So he has 6 civil actions left over. If he takes Red Cross and builds... Sorry, I need to count this again. So Steve Jobs, civil service, 6 civil actions. Can only spend 2 actions taking Red Cross, or 2 steps on Red Cross. And then I figured all the rest of us could take 1 each. He could also not go for Jobs and just go for civil service and then take 4 steps of the Red Cross, which could be possible. But I kind of thought that if you went for Red Cross, it would take off some military pressure Irene is definitely the one that I'm worried about the most in terms of military right now, since he has actual science in order to go for the right techs. He has good, like very good units already. If he has cannons and he goes for cannons and one cannon, that's kind of a big strength increase already. It would get +5 plus 5 plus 9, so 31 at least, and then the next Air Force afterwards would be quite a bit. So I was kind of hoping that he would go for jobs here, and jobs, civil service, Red Cross, which I thought would make a lot of sense. But Iron did spend a lot of time on this turn, and he actually goes for a different route, which is that he takes the tanks along with it. So this means that Chaplain falls off on Silent's turn. It makes me really sad because he already has the cavalrymen. I felt like it would make more sense if he wanted to take the movies to speculate into culture production. But he does this to deny Chaplain for me, and I think this hurts me a lot. And he also does get stronger in this way. So this way I do feel a lot more pressured in general, now that he has Modern Army. He has so much science. He can go for military theories. He can go for fundamentalism. He can go for Manhattan Projects, maybe. Doesn't really have a lot of resource production right now, but he's still the one that I'm scared about the most. He only needs 15 plus 14 more, so he needs 29 resources plus minus the 10 that he has, and just 19 more total. So there are quite a few reserves left. There's patriotism left. I am definitely a little bit on the worried side of Irene because this does leave open the potential for some military pressure, and it's something that I don't really want to respond to. Alright, Silent's turn. No leaders for him to take really. Prosperity does come up, so even more food comes out. Silent goes for Manhattan and essentially just finishes it this turn. I'm a little surprised. He didn't really need the strength. Maybe he can't defend. Maybe he couldn't spend his resources very well, but I'm definitely a little surprised. Honestly thought he could just maybe increase food production, just increase, take the engineering or something. Maybe take corruption. Actually, no, that wouldn't make any sense. So increase, take oil or something like that. He is unluckily at 8 instead of 9, so he probably would have gone for oil this turn if he could have. But yeah, I was a little surprised on this. I feel like this is a very expensive way to get strength. It's only 4 culture. I do kind of feel like he could have waited. There's both Einstein and Gates, so there's payoffs to go for bigger labs and stuff. So it does mean that he's the strongest. It could be telling into what events he seeded, that he doesn't want to be the weakest. And yeah, but I don't think if he gets hit by certain events, I don't think they'd be too bad. But yeah, I wasn't really sure about this turn, but the next turn kind of does make sense why he does go for it, which is I seed impact culture here and refugees hits. So Silent is now the strongest of the weakest. I'm still just not 100% convinced that was completely worth it, because he could have just increased population to avoid most of the bad stuff about it as well. Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like that was a turn that you could have increased production essentially. Yeah, so you could have taken Manhattan, maybe upgrade. Just two of the 3 upgrades, and then increase pop and take oil or something. Yeah. But I don't know. It just doesn't feel great, I think, to be honest. To finish Manhattan for only 4, and to still not really be a huge military threat. Because the next strongest you can really get is 1 Air Force or 2 cannons, and plus 11 or plus 12 isn't like the most. And I felt like he could have defended with plenty, and it just felt like a turn to do a little bit more on the economy, to be honest. But he does win this refugees, and that is definitely a benefit. It's kind of like artificially increasing your food. So yeah, maybe I'm just wrong. Alright, so from here I can increase pop, build my last theater. I'm still not really worried about potential strength from Airren or Silent just yet, because they don't have enough resources or military actions. Churchill doesn't really have enough, military infrastructure yet. And I can still get to, what was it, 43? I also want to take this military theory in order to deny potential threats as much as possible. And then for my last few actions, I end up being the one taking Red Cross. I don't start it. I actually increased pop and spent 5 of the food. But I'll have 9 this turn, and I'm perfectly happy sharing it. If I'm going to get 17 and the rest get 6, that's good enough for me. Plus, this food is pretty valuable to other people as well. Airren can definitely build on it. Silent can definitely build on it. But even though Churchill has 15 food, I think it's pretty clear that he wants to go for some kind of war and really needs the population. He definitely wants to get at least 2 classic armies and 2 air forces or something in that vein. And spending any amount of food can really pull away from the amount of population that he can get. Plus, it doesn't have a lot of civil actions, so it does tax that as well. So Churchill goes for 2 cavalrymen, copies classic army, now it's one of the 2 strongest, finishes upgrading the arena, and then takes this rev idea. So I ended up not having enough civil actions in order to do the Red Cross, which I think that he probably wants to keep the population anyways, since he can pop once for another unit next turn and another one after that. And if he needs more, he can start disbanding. He did have to disband a mine because he was the weakest. So that's even less population. Alright, so Airren goes for, I forgot exactly. I imagine he's going to grab this Red Cross. Silent has the most culture. Should really probably look at the stats page. I should have probably done this at the start of H3, but Airren, Silent, and I all have very similar culture counts now. In a sense, after 1 cycle of production, we'll all be pretty similar. Obviously, Airren's is artificially low, because he gets about 4 more every turn from jobs. Silent production is bad, but has a little bit of a lead, and my production is definitely very good. So this gap is why Churchill is definitely going for this very one-dimensional plan. Anyways, build this up in my Red Cross. Takes fundamentalism for the war possibility. Takes multimedia, urban growth, and of course takes Air Force here. And actually builds one, so this is a now threatening amount of strength, but at the same time, it's not a threatening amount of resources. It is going to be very difficult for Airren to still war, even if he goes for fundamentalism, because he doesn't really have that much extra strength beyond what he has showing. He really needs some extra resources if he wants to. Would need 15 total to complete an army, so getting 8 more through an event isn't really going to happen. So I'm not too worried about him yet still on this coming turn. I do want to be able to defend aggressions, but I have 2 defense cards. and something. Yeah, it's just something I want to look at. This is 6 of the 8 resources, so this actually does start to be concerning. But like I said, not really enough civil actions, or sorry, not really enough military actions right now, and it doesn't have like a patriotism or something in order to get the extra resource that it needs. But it's very close to being very, very threatening. Silent builds a step, gets a little bit stronger, takes modern infantry, and I think this really shows which tactic that he possibly has, either positional or entrenchments. Yeah, entrenchments. By building the cannon instead of the swordsman, basically. Also, Silent is already quite strong because he has Manhattan, so I think pretty good defense in general. And taking these military techs makes it harder for other people to get stronger as well. So going into my turn, I only have aggressions. I kept these patriotisms for a really long time to have the potential to go for a war, and I really look at it, but it's honestly not really worth it. The most I can war for is 55, so I don't really want to disband for it or anything. Just feel like going for my own culture plays is probably good enough, and get strong enough to defend an aggression though. So for the endowment, take the Air Force. I feel very fortunate to be the one of the other 2 people getting Air Force. This really makes me feel very, very comfortable now, because I don't really have tactics that I can go into. I'm going to have 12 science next turn as well. I feel very fortunate that I won't be a war target now that I have Air Force, and my military potential suddenly goes from 43 all the way up to like 76 or something. And it's something that I really want to keep in mind, basically, of how much strength people can get to offensively. And yeah. So I finished the Red Cross. Finally disband that irrigation that I thought that wouldn't have provided me so much food, but if I had upgraded it, I probably honestly would have built up enough food by this time to just regularly population increase. But I do disband it so that I can finally finish my 3rd defensive army. And I still don't use this patriotism, which I think is probably a mistake. I want to preserve as many resources as possible, and then I also, in addition to that, I compound it by, I think, taking the worst card in the row, taking this multimedia. I'm like speculating because I really want a leader, and Einstein is a possibility. So I could Rev Idea, multimedia, and then maybe eventually build up this. 2 into 9 means I need more resources though, so wouldn't even be for like another turn after. The best card to take here, I think, was Modern Infantry. I would have gone the extra culture from Colosseum, and it's like kind of an easy way to get stronger if I don't want to disband. Maybe it would just be like an impact thing. But just the fact that Modern Infantry is here, I do think I could have taken. The other option is that I could have tried to do something different along the way, and maybe taken these rockets, and that would kind of severely limit the type of army that Churchill can go for. I know that, Modern Army is now showing, and he can copy it this turn. So building 2 rockets this turn and copying it is a lot of strength. But then I realize, he only has 4 military actions. He has a war over culture. Goes from about Goes up 2 rockets, so plus 10, plus 13. It's not like that much strength if you only get one more Air Force over. And I can still defend for a potential 76. So it's hard for him to think about going for me for a war. But I could have definitely finagled this to make it so that Red's potential strength was a lot lower. And then Air Force comes out this turn, so he actually even needs to invest the civil actions into the Air Force this turn, so he can't even go for 2 rockets this turn. So it makes it even harder. I feel like it makes it even harder to really go for a war. But I guess like with the amount of resources he has, it really is only 2 armies plus 1 Air Force at the most. Yeah. Something to look at in this turn though is that at the end of this turn and the start of Airren's, Airren, Silent, and I are, again, I still feel like we're all in much more similar cultures. I am starting to pull away a little bit since I finished the Red Cross. Airren, though, does have a bunch of science, good amount of resources right now, and very good strength potential, and a couple good yellow cards in order to help him shore up his defenses if he needs to. So the person that I'm worried about most at this point is Airren, since it doesn't seem like Red would try to go for a war with the same tactic, since it won't be that much stronger. So it starts to look a lot more like me or Silent would have that privilege, basically, of being warred. I'm hoping that at this point that it would be Silent. So yeah, now I'm like more worried that I should have taken the rockets instead of the Air Force. But if I didn't take the Air Force, then I wouldn't have been able to defend us properly as well. So I definitely am looking at my last turn, kind of like really wondering why I didn't take the rockets to deny them. Just because it would have been so much harder for this to be a possible strength. Saving grace is that there's still only 4 civil action or 4 military actions, so that only plays around the fact that if there's a hybrid war. But to be honest, it does feel like Red has been playing around it the whole time, playing for a war the whole time. So I imagine that he wouldn't leave himself in a position where he can't get a pretty big war off. But something to be said is that even if hybrid war does happen, it doesn't really hurt that much in terms of the point swing. So the fact that I am at a very high culture makes it so that I'm less likely to be a target. It just does feel like I put myself in a situation where Red gets to like play Kingmaker if he wants to. If he really chose to, he could be like, hey, I want either a Silent or he wants either me or Airren to win by just choosing the other person to war. And it's a little bit helpless to be in that situation, but I also kind of brought it upon myself by not denying those rockets. And it's starting to feel really bad here, basically. Airren goes for an aggression against me. How the defense card gets those yellows. Goes for a multimedia and goes for a religion because he's going to use it with his urban growth next turn. Basically giving him the rest of science and possibilities of better like impacts of architecture and happiness and stuff like that. He has 20 science left over, so he can develop 2 techs next turn. So this +7 is going to be at least +15 next turn, which is about equal to my cultural reduction. Silent impact architecture is open, so it's not I guess that extra efficient upgrade is not going to matter. Goes for Marie and oil, goes up to a lot of production, and I feel like it should be relatively safe. Has enough resources for modern infantry, for 2 armies, and behind Manhattan should have a relatively high strength potential. And I was definitely thinking at the time that red couldn't really do much more than just, War of Culture and a rocket. It's hard for me to consider playing around Hybrid War because it's a one-of card, and honestly, red has not drawn that many military cards. But I should have probably noted that he was playing like he had a war the whole time. But honestly, I don't think Silent could do much more in terms of defense. And then age ends, and at this point, I just go for Mandela and take the reserves for a maximum defense possible if it comes up. Because I can't really get much more culture production anyways, so just give myself maximum flexibility. And red does go for the hybrid war here. Has enough happy faces, has enough resources, and I think I actually thought this was smaller. Ends up being 85. For some reason I thought it would be like in the 70s. But this 80, and I think that's part of it is because I kind of forgot to calculate these pro sports in terms of how much strength they would have. And this is definitely enough to like knock somebody down a peg. At this point, Silent has basically the lowest culture potential, lowest strength potential. So I think that's why red is taking his shot at going for third at least. Takes military theory, takes computers. I really wish he took satellites here, actually. One of the reasons I would like him to take satellites instead of both of these is because, instead of the computers, he can take satellites. Because Airren can't take the computers, but can take the satellites for variety, basically. But instead plays the revolutionary idea. Which, I mean, that's a very small thing, and mostly only benefits me anyways. Alright, so Airren, Cold War is revealed, which I think is super unfortunate that it's revealed on this turn. Basically the only event that would allow him to develop 3 things. And he had to take 2 of them off this row. So again, yeah. Cold War is super unfortunate. Maybe a developed territory or an autonomous territory would get him enough as well. But still, I felt like that was the best event that could happen. So it went from plus 15 to plus 19 culture this turn essentially. And then looks like he prepares for impact of harmony because of 6 and everything, the way that he built this out. But at the same time, there's probably not too much else to build with only 2 resources remaining. But it does definitely look like impact of harmony to me. One of the things that I would be super concerned about is impact of technology, since there's 6 cards. Since it's going to have 6 here, I'm only going to have the 1, so the game gets very close. Silent has to defend the war. Autonomous comes out after Airren develops satellites, so that hurts. Defends the card and takes the culture. Silent defends basically as best as he can. Has to disband. Really hurts possible harmonies, possible balances. He doesn't disband on mine though, so this makes me think of impact of industry. And also disbands like a farm instead of the lab. So maybe he had impact agriculture already showed. So maybe impact of variety is also possible. I see impact competition. It's a little bit better for me than Airren. I figured that I was going to win this just because if Airren goes for it, there's no real benefit. I'm the only one who can really benefit from it, so I figured that I would probably get it, and that's just what happens. And here, basically play all my cards out. Try to increase my competition a little bit. This temple's worth 2 culture. And if I take this back a little bit, I had the option of building this temple or trying to go for strength. This temple's 2 culture, and I was really also focused on the fact that Airren looked like he went for harmony, and the fact that Silent looked like he went for industry. So I thought I could kill 2 birds with 1 stone by building this mine here, getting a little bit extra production. So I lose 1, could gain 1, but could possibly gain 4. One of the reasons this could be bad is that I could put both of these into swordsman instead, or keep them in the swordsman, and I would actually be a little bit stronger than Silent. One of the things to note here is that I have 2 impacts, Silent has 2 impacts, Airren has 1, Churchill has 1. So there's a my one thing with the swordsman is that it's possible that there's strength. I know that there's competition, so I know each of these is worth at least 1. It's possible that there's strength, but it's also very possible that, since Silent has seeded more, there's a pretty good chance of variety. He has 5, 6, 7, which I think is pretty good. Airren definitely has more, but he only really got 2 of these on the last turn. And the library came the turn before, so it increases variety a lot in the last 2 turns. And I was really thinking that, Airren has harmony here. So kind of want to try and maximize harmony over strength. Red didn't draw that many impacts. It'd be really hard to go for strength, I think, for his position. He'd have to get really lucky to somehow have hybrid war and impact of strength, which is definitely possible. But I can't defend anyways. This also helps with happiness a little bit. I guess I also could have built a second temple instead to, this would be -1, this would be +2 essentially, and it could be up to +4 for happiness. But I kind of lock into the idea of industry and harmony. So that's what I do. I end a little bit stronger than Airren, but not as strong as Silent. And kind of figured that Red would go for this aggression that comes up to try and maximize points against Silent as well. This is still a huge deficit though, so it's not really easy to see what's going to happen. Yeah. Another thing that I could have done is also I could have went for a printing press to try and go over Red for science, but I figured that if I went for science for a printing press, he, instead of building this mine, probably would have just built this lab, so it's not really a big deal anyways. But coming into this, Airren and I have a pretty slight lead, and then Silent has a pretty sizable lead over Red. So it's essentially two races, but one looks kind of already set. I really do think that Airren has the better civilization in terms of impacts, even though 2 of them are mine. I have culture and competition in. I think both of those net me about 7 total. But if something like impact of technology comes out, I would lose 20 straight up, and I would be behind. So if impact of science comes up too, that's also 15 and could eat it all away right away. So kind of just have to see what happens in the impacts. First one is impact of science, so that 16 culture lead is immediately eaten up right away. I'm actually a little bit on the relief side because this could have been impact of technology, which would have been +20 instead. So I consider this the better of the 2 worst case scenarios. So at least I only lost 15 instead of 20, basically. That's what I'm getting at. Impact of industry, so I did read that part right from Silent. But I definitely read the harmony part wrong. I probably shouldn't have even played for it, looking back, because harmony wouldn't allow Airren a chance of winning, so I should have probably gone for other impacts instead. Strength does happen, so I could have gone for the extra swordsman. That would have given me competition and strength, so that would have been +5 basically. Competition, so are mine. So I have a pretty sizable lead. I also know that impacted culture is coming in. It starts to get a little bit closer, but it still looks like a huge deficit. Impacted culture, with only one impact remaining and a 14 difference, or 13 difference. The only one that I feel like I can lose to is impacted technology, and I don't think anybody would cede science and technology for Airren, basically, so I think I have this locked up. Impacted government, this is actually a lot bigger than I thought it would be, and a lot closer, but I do end up just a little bit ahead of Airren, and Silent ends up, still a very reasonable amount against red here. Yeah, so at the conclusion of this game, there have been 3 games completed in Grandmaster. One of those 3-player games was mine. I also still played against Red here, along with Samaris. He actually won this. Red actually won this. Samaris took second, and I took third. The other 3-player game was Samaris, Mushan, and Gingaship. In that order. So the overall standings at this point are it's not too much going on since only 3 games have been finished, but Samaris is ahead with 7 points. I have 6 next, and then Red has 5 afterwards. And Airren, Mushan, Silent, those are the only ones with points left in 3, 2, 1 that order, but they only have 1 game completed. Anyways, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time when I try to do the next 4-player game for the International Championship.